Hi everybody out there in plant pod land. Today we're welcoming Brandon Hebor to the podcast. Brandon is an expert on hydroponics. I always like looking at people when I'm telling them what they are to see if it's resonating. An expert in hydroponics and the owner of Boreal Greens Co. He's going to help us understand what it means to grow hydroponically. There's other ponics that we're going to be talking about as well. Aquaponics and Aeroponics.
To name a few.
There's a lot of ponics. This is our ponics man. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion because our community has really been asking for hydroponic information. We can really see a shift and an interest towards this as a topic. So I'm so grateful to be able to sit with you and kind of give everybody the info from a horse's mouth, not the horse's mouth, but
a lovely
horse's mouth. So welcome to the podcast, Brandon.
Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit with everybody about hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics, bioponics, and the world of growing without soil, or as broader people would classify it as controlled environment agriculture.
Ooh, very scientific now. We've just got, keep up people. Okay, so lovely to have you here. I'm just going to jump in. We have a whole bunch of questions and we're going to take it as it comes.
Absolutely.
So maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into hydroponics.
Yeah, well, that's we'll be here for about 3.5 days, if that's all right with you. But I'll try to give you the Coles notes in about 45 seconds. But I started in hydroponics. It actually evolved from a hobby where I had my first connection to the land, which was through my great-grandparents who were avid, backyard gardeners. And as a kid growing up, we would, be in their backyard. I'd be watering all the plants and then wouldn't really know what I was doing. I was like, take this jug and pour it over there on these plants. And then eventually at the end of the season, you get to eat your harvest. And that was this connection to the land where it wasn't just food on a plate. It was food from this plant. And so, my own journey, I eventually became an environmental scientist and took the path down, again, the sciences towards wanting to be and use my time on this planet as a steward of the environment and find different ways and creative solutions to help tackle climate change, help with the sustainable evolution of our planet, et cetera. And then it actually sort of evolved as a hobby where I had started to grow more things in our own backyard garden at my parents' house. And then towards the last years of my university days, I started to experiment with this hydroponics idea, right? And it was like, well, I wonder if I could grow lettuce in my parents' kitchen. It was sort of like a sunroom, and I wonder if I could do this and grow it year round and be able to show my friends. And it was just sort of a really hobby kind of thing. So I built this home grow unit. I was trying out hydroponics, and I did research and YouTube University, and looking at all sorts of stuff. And then eventually, after 3 different trials and some heartfelt moments where I killed all my plants multiple times and I felt pretty bad, I finally got my plants growing and was like, okay, this is really cool, and started to learn more by applying myself and doing, getting my hands wet instead of dirty, we'll say, in hydroponics. And actually, it wasn't until a number of years ago I met somebody who sort of had the opportunity and said, why don't we take this thing you built in your basement and try to turn it into a business? And so then, that's 8 years ago now, and lo and behold, I've grown hundreds of thousands of plants, educated almost 10,000 people, been on a number of different, outlets and platforms in terms of supporting the evolution of, aquaponics that then brings in agriculture to hydroponics, as well as providing, education around how people can grow at home, grow at a commercial scale, grow in community centers, and do it without the need to have soil, without having volatility of our climate environment, to eventually get to their goal, which was how can we produce things on our own to be more self-sufficient, whether again it's at home, it's in indigenous or remote communities, it's in community centers for people with physical or mental disabilities who find meaningful work in the workplace by connecting to agriculture. And so that's the long story short of my journey, but it's been a combination of understanding the science and then fueled by the passion of using the science and this application of hydroponics to empower people on a social level. And it sort of aligns with my purpose and what I continue to do with Boreal Greens Co.
Okay, perfect segue. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your business and what you're doing commercially as part of that business.
Yeah, well, Boreal Greens Co is a seed to sale farming company that provides technology as well as servicing for both commercial scale farming operations as well as small home grow units. And we realized that, not only do we on a systems level really need to rethink how our food systems work and the food coming from factory farms and imports. COVID really amplified the problems that we have, and now obviously with a war and supply chain issues, we're looking at this really interesting dynamic of the future of food. What does it look like? How are crops being affected by climate change, by geopolitical, by economic, all these different factors? And so on one scale, the commercial scale, is how do we develop a resilient system by having a decentralized nodal network of farms that empower communities, that employ communities, that support what the community wants to grow, as opposed to growing food in a massive factory
in isolation
hundreds of kilometers away, where actually it's very disconnected. And having an urban agriculture business, realizing that the people in the city are more disconnected to their food than ever. Now, obviously, COVID has changed that and now amplified the interest in home growing, and now there's a lot of courses and things online, so people are getting excited. And so Boreal is here to support people by providing technology with services at different scales to empower them to grow what they want, to eat. And so I'm not really a company that has a one-stop shop, one solution. You need to eat this lettuce, and vertical farms are going to change the world.
Lettuce.
Only lettuce, right? The least nutrient-rich crop we could possibly grow, right? So I'm a big advocate of not necessarily growing lettuce in vertical farms, because calories and dynamic micronutrients are what supports the human body. So back to the overall goal is not just to have the novelty of a technology or system, it's to how to leverage this technology and knowledge to empower yourself, right? To grow what you want and to really support the nutrition and health of our people, and really in Canada to start, and obviously I'd love to be around the world eventually.
Right. Well, so we already talked a little bit about all the different kinds of ponics and different ways that people can be growing. I'd like to just get a little deeper into each of those if we can. For anyone who doesn't know, maybe let's give an overview of hydroponics, top line.
Yeah, well, I guess hydroponics is the act of growing without soil, and it's actually derived from a Greek term, hydro and ponos, which is working water, which is very interesting because basically in hydroponics, the water's doing the work. Needless to say is when water is doing the work, traditionally in hydroponics it's soilless. Some people can still do hydroponics with a soil sort of alternative or mix, but traditionally you're using what's called a substrate or like a plant plug to start and grow your plants. Something that I've brought a little demo here where you can see that this is sort of squishy. It's almost like a brownie or pumpernickel bread.
I did think he brought his own jar of pumpernickel bread today, but it's not.
Unfortunately. You could try to eat it. It probably wouldn't go too well down the digestive tract, but that's where most of the baby plants will be started. And as they're growing, depending on the size and type of plant, they can be planted into bigger substrates that replicate the physical or mechanical properties of what a soil would do to a plant. Right. And then what we do in hydroponics is we supplement the nutrients. Obviously, there's lots of water, but contained in the water is what's called fertigation, so fertilizer integrated in your hydration. Yep. And that allows us to provide micro and macronutrients for these plants to support their growth. So that's like the highest level of hydroponics of growing, with water.
And something that I've learned in the last little period is that fertilizer that is in the water can be added in many different ways.
Absolutely.
So the most exciting thing, I don't want to blow the secret, but the most exciting thing that I saw was containing a whole bunch of living creatures in this system. Maybe I'll let you spill the tea on what
Perhaps.
That is.
Well, yeah. Well, funnily enough, I'd say there's two primary alternatives. One's a lot more well-known than the other, and that would be aquaponics. So we stick with the ponics because we've got our working water, but then we tie in aqua, which is aquaculture. So usually what happens in aquaponics is we're connecting a RAS, which is a recirculating aquaculture system, with a hydroponic system. We match the biological parameters of our fish and our plants as best we can, which usually for most home growers and hobbyists is tilapia, because they're warm water, freshwater fish and very resilient. They also grow very quickly. And essentially we are feeding our fish. Our fish are peeing, pooping, living, growing in their fish tanks, but the water is being pumped through the fish tanks in through what would be called like a biofilter, or there's mechanical filtration and then biological surface area where we create the conditions for healthy, happy bacteria to come and colonize. And the job of those bacteria is basically to convert toxic ammonia into bioavailable nitrate that then the plants can uptake.
That then just gets uptaken up into the plants growing on top of themselves.
Exactly.
Right.
And traditionally in aquaponics, you'll see like a raft culture, or called deep water culture, where the plants are sitting on a styrofoam raft and there's between 8 and 12, sometimes 14 to 16 inches of water. And that water below the plants, the fish don't live in that water. They live in a separate fish tank, but within that water is contained all of the nutrients that the plants would need to grow.
I just find this so fascinating.
The other thing really quickly
Yeah.
to add to that ponics is from the nutrient source. So we have nutrient source potentially from our fish, but then there's also bioponics.
Yes.
And so bioponics is something interesting where we're using biological material, whether or not it's nutrient teas, it could be steeping, basically, processing and steeping like banana peels and some other organic matter from household.
Eggshells, that kind of things that people are putting in their soil. You're doing the same on the water side.
Just like a compost tea.
Yeah.
Right, that people use to supplement their gardens. And so that compost tea it's a high potency nutrient source, so you can actually dilute it in some water and use it to supplement usually it's at home, hydroponic systems that people will use the biological.
Small scale, yeah.
Exactly, because you don't get the same consistency that, commercial growers, and unfortunately, I guess, commercial growers like quality and consistency, so usually we end up using either liquid or powder-based nutrients where you can, precisely dose the plants as to what they need.
Got it.
Yeah.
So there's a ponics we haven't talked about, aeroponics.
Yes. Well, Aeroponics.
I'll let you do that one.
Exactly. I feel like a library right now. But
good. You're a walking encyclopedia, which is what everybody wants.
Exactly. When you live it and love it, you tend to remember it, right? So the other thing in aeroponics is essentially aeroponics is the act of either usually dripping or spraying the root zone of a plant with water. So they're not consistently submersed in the water. There's not I don't want to say, because within hydroponics there's different techniques, right? There's also like a flood and drain technique, which is ebb and flow, so the water's rising and lowering. There's NFT, nutrient film or nutrient flow, where we have one source and the water flows through like a channel. Aeroponics is essentially allowing, and most traditionally it's a mist or a spray onto the plant roots, so they get misted. They're full of, the mist is full of fertigated solution, so it's moisture, it's nutrients, and the oxygen in the air allows the plant roots to actually grow a lot quicker. Higher levels of oxygen usually lead to healthier root zones, except in certain situations it becomes risky, because if your pipes get clogged or your pump goes out, the plants don't have the same capacity to get their moisture from other sources.
Got it. Mm-hmm. You've gotten them used to feeding them their moisture and they just don't have the ability to do?
Yeah, it becomes a little bit trickier, right? And especially if you integrate like an aeroponic methodology with the fish, then sometimes you get sediments that then gum up the small misters and cause actually a number of problems.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
I have an unaware comment for you, which is aeroponics. Does this tie at all to our air plants? Is this the same system, squirting roots?
Not quite similar. Yes, similar.
Air plants are new to me. I'm just learning about air plants, and now I'm hearing about aeroponics. So I'm just wondering.
It's in a sense, yes.
Related?
Right? In one sense, yes. The cultivars obviously are different, because usually in the traditional aeroponics, you're growing like food for human consumption in that capacity. But same general methodology where you're allowing the roots to grow in air, and then you're spraying them with a moisture/fertilized solution to provide them with what they need, and they're essentially using the air to help breathe and stay healthy. And you don't have any substrate or sort of like plug. Most plants when they start, they have to grow in something to at least get the tap root down. So in aeroponics, you usually still start with a substrate, but then, you know, these long hanging roots just get sprayed and they start to net, you know, outward. And it's actually a bit of a proven quicker way to grow because of the amount of oxygen that you have. So lots.
I'm going to get this. I'm going to retain this one day. We're getting there. I think today may be the day.
Well, we'll have to get you your own little home grow system, and perhaps, you know, whether or not it's an Aero garden or one of the click and grow systems. I actually went to Best Buy the other day, and they're selling little tabletop farming systems in Best Buy, and I'm like, well, this is really ag tech, I guess.
Isn't this amazing? I have seen small little starter kits in the most strange of places. Indigo sells them, a bookstore, you have them in your home. It's just, the interest is spreading. I have a question for you. Why do you think interest around hydroponics is on the uptick? Why do you think people are talking about hydroponics these days?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are looking at different ways to grow without any volatility from outdoors. And hydroponics is a really interesting, it's got this cool element of science and technology. If you're adding like LED lights and different types of, you know, tech and fertilizer, sort of like a mad scientist, right? So a lot of hobbyists, they would love to play around, and that's what I was for a number of years, and still, like, you know, play and putz around with different things because it's exciting, right? To set up the system, all these pipes, and you're like, is it going to grow? Because really it's just a bunch of wood and plastic and, you know, metal and stuff, right? And then, you know, lo and behold, if you do it right and get the recipe, the plants are thriving. But I think that the pandemic also created an opportunity where people were looking for things, and in urban environments, there's not a lot of room to grow, and there's usually a long list for the community garden plots. So people are looking at smaller scale, creative ways that they can just start growing. You know, usually it's herbs and like leafy greens and things that people can sort of pick. And again, it's very rewarding when you can grow your own food. So now technology makes it easier. Yeah. And I think that that's part of one of the reasons why it's growing.
Well, a large part of our community is dedicated to small scale and urban growing. We have a lot of balcony growers within our community. So I think this is resonating a lot with what they've been asking for and what they need from us. So thank you. I'm very curious. I know you have a product. I'm excited to hear about it, but I'm curious about taking all of this science and knowledge that you just articulated and how it can happen on a large scale. Let's look at small scale individuals' homes. How do you think, or how are trends going in the direction of people being able to use hydroponic growing in their houses?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest caveats that we've got, especially, you know, we'll say in Canada in particular, is like, and throughout the United States, is we've been having these E. coli problems with our lettuce and romaine lettuce, usually coming out of Arizona, sometimes in California. Sometimes we don't know. I think the last time in Canada, it took us 58 days to find the source of the E. coli after product was in the shelf and people were being harmed. And so, you know, not only are there sort of push factors, there's pull factors where, hey, this is actually really easy. I can click, or I can go on my app, or I can go on YouTube, and I can figure out, you know, how to actually grow food at home. One of the easiest things is to look at growing at home to supplement your diet. And frankly, lettuce is one of the easiest crops in the world to grow. And herbs are relatively easy as well. And it's just a matter of giving yourself a space and a platform to try something different. And so when I, communicated with people who are growing at home, as well as the commercial vertical farms, and one of the things is when a vertical farm company comes out and says, we're the future of food, we're going to feed the world, vertical farms are going to save the day. It's like, they're not. Maybe they are in a certain capacity, but they're there to supplement a system and provide more resilience by producing locally and being more traceable and transparent in how things are grown, and obviously food safe. But at the home level, it's really easy once you start growing, some leafy greens, herbs at home, to actually supplement most of what you would be eating on a weekly basis. And so now there starts to be a technology that's a simple and easy to use tool that can then start to save people money. It also tastes better. It's higher in nutrients. They can grow exactly what they want. It's a little bit of a fun project. And so really it's like, why not at a certain point? It's just a matter of making maybe a little bit more time in your day to work through the seeding and harvesting process. But, going to your little home garden and snipping your lettuce, putting it into a dish, and maybe not even having to wash it because you know exactly where it's been the entire time. Yeah. It's a pretty good feeling.
So the goal of which for our community would be not to have lofty visions of growing all of what you need to consume. It's really just supplementing.
Absolutely. And it can also be a platform, a home grow system can be a platform to start your plants as like babies. You could have a little baby plant like this, maybe the root's a little bit shorter, but you can actually transplant this with this plug into your soil.
Yeah.
So you can get a bit of a head start.
Head start on the
right?
season, right.
Exactly. So it can be dynamic, right? Once you start to understand how this system could be used, you could be growing lettuce really easily. Lettuce is great because you can run what's called a cut and come again strategy. So, it grows, a lot of outdoor gardeners are doing it, right? About 2.5 to 3 inches above above the base. And then you're able to snip it, and then suddenly this
and then it comes again.
Growing back again, right? And it's like, well, why am I paying $5.99 every time I buy a salad pack or kit when really I can grow my spring mix from my basement, from my living room, really, right? So
you and your business have created a residential hydroponics growing solution.
Yes, it's a good fancy way to put it. Like a home grow unit, right?
A home grow unit. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so I've been in this space obviously for a number of years. It's been about 8 years now of being very involved in controlled environment agriculture, vertical farming and whatnot. And so I've witnessed the good, the bad, and the ugly, having not only built my own systems, but worked with a lot of people who have tried, who have failed, who have succeeded, and finding out, well, what's the balance between something that's cost effective and like produces enough. So it's not just a nice piece of furniture. Yes, it looks nice aesthetically, but it also is building a business case for a family or individual to say, well, if I do this and follow these steps, I'm actually saving money. And that sometimes is an incentive above and beyond the feel good of like, yeah, I grew my food. And it's sort of like, well, why are you doing this for a number of reasons? And so
the practicality of it.
Exactly, right? And so what we did is we created I'll call it an IKEA style sort of build it yourself flat pack design for a home grow unit. And that has a business case with it where, we've designed it so you can grow some baby tomatoes. So they're called tiny tom or dwarf tomatoes. You can grow some dwarf peppers. You can grow shallow root crops like you can grow radishes, some baby turnips. And then you can also grow all your leafy greens, your spinach, your kale, your chard, herbs, as well as microgreens. And so I like to stick with provide somebody with the knowledge and the equipment as a foundation, and then showcase the opportunities of what you can do, and then basically empower people to go out and do it themselves. Exactly.
Wonderful. So is this a product that is ready and out there for public now? Is it coming?
It's on the way.
It's on the way.
It's on the way.
It's on the way, everybody.
It's going to be another 30 to 45 days before we will have our formal release.
Yep.
But we've got 15 different trial systems. So we're looking for people who, are avid home growers who may be interested in demoing out a system at obviously a discounted cost, providing some feedback and helping support what we'd like to be is a community of indoor growers. And how can indoor ag help support what people might be doing on their balconies or backyards as well?
Brandon, I believe we can help you out with that.
Well, I hear you've got amazing community from what I've seen, heard, and spoken with you about. So.
Absolutely. So we're going to help you with that. We'll put a note out to the community because I think they would love to be involved.
That'd be amazing, right? And again, my job is just to provide the tools and hopefully a little empowerment and excitement to break down any of those initial hurdles where you watch all these YouTube videos and it looks really cool, but you can't quite figure out, or you don't have the confidence, and that's when I hope to step in and say, you can do it, and Boreal's here to help. All right.
Perfect. So. Love it. I have a next topic, which may not be as exciting, but it is cost of hydroponics. When I look at these structures that are created, when I look at the physical tools that you need to do it, in my head it screams expensive.
Yes. Well, obviously there's a lot more moving parts, pieces, and equipment than it is, growing in soil with free sunlight and free rain, and relatively inexpensive water. But with hydroponics, the cool thing is the foundations of the technology are so scalable, or the system is so scalable. So you have anything from what can be on your tabletop that can be $50, $100, $200, $300 on a tabletop, again, depending on how advanced it is, to home grow towers, units, cabinets, these kinds of things. That can
basements.
Well, that's even bigger, right? Because then, you're talking about a unit that can range from hundreds to maybe a couple of $1,000s, I'd say is the best range. To then you start to go small scale commercial that costs you anywhere between, $3,000 to $15,000, and then you start to sort of go more commercially. But again, it's situationally based as to what crop you want to grow also determines how many lights you might have to buy, or do you want to run aeroponics versus hydroponic flood and drain, and do you need more misters, or are there more components involved?
It's very customized.
Exactly, right? So there's a lot of different things, and the challenge for me is I've never been a person that sort of is like, this is what you need, it's the best thing ever. It's like, well, there's all these different options and everybody has a different situation. Right. So figure out maybe what sort of suits you best, and actually from a downstream perspective is, what do I want to grow? If you want to grow like radishes and root crops or tomatoes, you don't really want to grow in like a tiny little click and grow garden, because frankly, it's just too small. Now you want something with a bit more room, but sometimes people like to get their feet wet or hands wet in this situation, not dirty, and start with something small. Get the confidence, and then say, oh, we can do this, or let's do this as a family project, and the kids can help, seed or whatever it might be. So frankly, the answer to your question is it can be from hundreds to tens of millions when you look at these big vertical farming hydroponic companies.
Okay, tens of millions I don't have to worry about, because I will not be a commercial farmer, but a couple hundred might work in my tiny little house. So Brandon, what do you see for the future of hydroponics, ponics, all the ponics?
The ponics, the future of food. Well, I think that the future is really bright, and it's very interesting because we are living in, and I believe we passed the point where over 50% of our global population now lives in urban areas. And so there's more concrete than soil in these urban areas. There's more people than ever on the planet, and everybody needs to eat. So again, there's different places around the world with different, culturally appropriate diets. So it's not as if everybody perhaps is eating lettuce. But I think that the future of this technology is that it's being proven, it's being scaled up, it's being scaled down. There's a lot more knowledge and general awareness out there about it. And so I could see a hydroponic system of some capacity in almost every home, in the world, right? Because the ability to start growing your own food is more empowering. It's also more sustainable, it's more resilient, it's more cost-effective and economical. And since now we have technology and price points that are coming down, down, and down, really, I think, frankly, it's part of, because I'm not going to say that it's the be-all and end-all where you're going to grow all the strawberries you want to grow or eat, or you're not going to grow wheat or corn or anything like that, really.
I only have a strawberry diet.
Oh, well... Well, I can help you. It's just be a bit of a different design. But, frankly, it would be great if we could envision a future where people are going to the grocery store, and instead of buying heads of lettuce, they're buying seedlings that they can then take home and grow themselves. Yeah. So now we're creating a better resiliency in our supply chain. We're helping people save time. We're letting them grow. We're letting it, products be harvested, because within 12 hours, if not less, of a plant being harvested, it's usually lost about 50% of its nutrients. And so if we think about, okay, we've got viruses and bacteria that's circulating around our planet, we want to be healthy, we want to build up our gut microbiome, our support our immune system. Well, growing your own food is one of those things that can really support that. And again, with climate change and uncertainty in our environment, and depending on where people are living in the world, growing indoors and using controlled environment agriculture with supplemental lighting, it becomes very important as a tool to building our future. So I do see this as an opportunity, where it can scale quite quickly, albeit we fight in a sense of a much larger, very powerful food system. And cost, convenience are the two most important things. So I think as technology sort of gets smarter to cater to the needs of people's busy lives, farming in one shape or form, I think, can be a part of everybody's life. Or, farming, growing, growing it and your own food.
Yeah. Well, we agree wholeheartedly, obviously. You guys at home agree wholeheartedly. So I'm committing us to propagating your message. This is great.
That's exciting, right?
Yeah.
And I love doing things like this to get the word out and try to showcase what we can do, because we can, as entrepreneurs, we can do anything.
We can do anything, and there's so many, as we've learned, there's so many different ways to grow now. So we can find the best way for ourselves and our situations and where we're at. That was a lot of great information, Brandon.
I know. I'm sorry. I may have babbled on a whole bunch of things, but hopefully we've got a slow enough recording that everybody can hear it smoothly and a repeat.
We'll play it in slow
necessary.
motion. I see you as a great educator, and so I suspect I will be calling you at another time, Brandon, to come back and talk to us more about what you're doing and your expertise.
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Well, at some point in time, I think in early 2023, I would love to have you back and hopefully at my facility that's in King City, Ontario, and be able to actually walk you through the vertical farm, and perhaps we'll bring the cameras and the recorders and we can do our next podcast
Road trip. Road trip. We're
and then
in.
I can feed you, right? Then we can go to the restaurant. We can actually go into the farm. We can harvest our food. We can go to the restaurant and have a nice lunch and really close the loop on things.
Amazing. Brandon, thanks for
Absolutely.
coming.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
See you next time on the pod, everybody. And in the meantime, if any of you community members have tried your hand at some hydroponics, aeroponics, aquaponics, we would really love to hear about it in the comments. I'd love to see how successes or challenges have come up so that hopefully we can help you address them moving forward. Bye, guys.